This is a screencast for Lesson 2.1 in Unit 2 of the Freshman Literacy course. The purpose of this is just to give you a basic overview of the lesson so that it will kickstart your planning and preparation for the unit. So as this unit starts out, it starts out very similar to Lesson 1.1 in the first unit, and it starts off with our Power 10 strategy of the word splash. And so students will be instructed to look at their word splash and to go through and to put a star next to words that they know and they could explain to a friend, and then also put a question mark next to any words that they're unsure of. And so they'll do that independently. Next, they'll be put into small groups where they will do the round robin strategy. And so one person will be instructed to go first and explain the one word that they starred and its definition. So we don't want to see students just listing the words. We want them to actually describe what the word means in their own words so that they can verbalize their thinking. So students will go around and list all the words that they do know one by one in their groups. Next, they'll switch over to describing the words that they don't know. And so as students do that, they may discover that they actually knew a word that they didn't think they did, or they may be able to define it after talking to some of their peers. And so they'll do that. Next, they will do the door slap. And so what they'll need to do is have a sticky note or a small sheet of paper, and they'll need to generate two questions that they have using some of the words from the word splash. And it can be, how are some of these words used in a different context? It's really open. But they'll need to put them up, and the teacher should use this as a formative assessment to review and see kind of where students are at the beginning of this unit in regards to what words they know, what do they not know, so that you have a good sense of where students are at. So after students complete this, they will move into a description of an overarching description of the unit, and you'll also give them the portfolio assignment sheet. And so you're going to describe to them the end of unit assessment, which is that career portfolio. And so you'll want to read over this sheet with them, and it describes some of the words, or I'm sorry, some of the pieces of work that they'll be submitting, like the letter of intent, the resume, reference sheet, things like that. You'll also want to briefly go over the rubric. I wouldn't spend a ton of time going super deep with this, but just so students have an idea of where they're headed in the curriculum. Next, students will begin to brainstorm some of their strengths and how they developed those strengths. And I believe that this worksheet is not in the student workbook, so you'll either need to print it out or you could simply have students draw this onto a separate sheet of paper. And so the purpose of this is to get them prepared for writing their first draft of their resume, which they'll do at the end of the lesson. And so students need to list some of the skills and abilities that they currently have and how they developed those skills. And so there is an example up here for you, and you might want to also include one that's personalized from yourself to help them start brainstorming. So students will do that for about 8 minutes. After that, we move into a question chunk annotate activity where they'll be reading this article, How to Land Your First Job. And so before they even start with the question chunk annotate, we're going to do a pre-reading strategy called possible sentences. And this is really to prime them up to read this article. So the strategy called possible sentences takes 5 words out of the actual article, and students are asked to make up a sentence based on what they know about those words or what they predict that those words will be used in the actual article. And so it lists an example. Students will need to do that. There's some collaboration with peers where they will share each other's answers, and if they weren't able to come up with a sentence for one of them, they are allowed to use their partner's sentence. So again, through that collaboration and discussion, it will hopefully prompt their thinking and get them primed for our question chunk annotate article, which is titled How to Land Your First Job. So as you can see in this article, it is short, but unlike in the first unit where we had the stop signs, those have been taken out, and so we are scaffolding quite a bit. And so what students will need to do is their question chunk annotate is in the format of this graphic organizer. So you'll need to teach students to look at each section. So they'll want to read the game plan section, and then they'll want to summarize the 2 most important things that they found in that section. So this also builds on the strategy that we learned, being brief, in lesson 1.6. So we're working on summarization and finding some of the key ideas. You'll want to instruct students to put it in their own words and not just copy right out of the article. And so after students have completed that, you'll want to go through and ask for some student responses. So again, you can do a formative assessment to gauge the room and see how students did on this. What were some of the gaps? So after students have done all of that, where they've brainstormed their skills and their abilities, and they've read this article about how to land your first job, we're actually going to have students dive in and start to write their own resume. This will be the very first draft, and so they're going to use this template right here. And so you're going to have them just fill it in as best that they can based on what they know about a resume. They will use the information from this sheet, their skills and how they develop those skills, to put onto their resume. And you may need to model this for students depending on the needs of your class. And so they will begin to list some of their skills and some of their abilities and then how they developed those skills. Again, we're not expecting perfection at this point, but we do need to get students to start generating some of their thoughts. You'll want to collect this at the end of the lesson and review them so you have a general sense as to where students are doing in regards to this before the next lesson. So this will definitely serve as a formative assessment as you finish up the lesson. So that's lesson 2.1 in a nutshell. Again, the main overarching outcome for this lesson is that students should be able to brainstorm the skills and abilities I bring to a job and describe how I develop those to prepare a resume. Good luck. Thank you.